So thank you, Andrew, for inviting me to speak, and thank you for coming to the session. I'm James Ted from ESB. We're not as well known over here as in our home market in Ireland. We're the state-owned electricity utility there. That gives some pictures of us. We've been working in Britain, though, for about 40 years now. We've invested about £4 billion over that period, mostly in generation fleet. At the moment, we're doing a lot more work in the sort of energy supply, energy services. So the talk today is around storage. I'll try to keep at a pretty high level as to what is storage, why does the system want storage, where can it be? Essentially, moving from the thermal stations of the past to a much greater renewable system in the future. In the last year, over 90% of the investment in new electricity generation was renewable across Europe. That's absolutely mirrored in Britain. Those wind farms, those solar farms, when it's sunny, when it's windy, they're generating. Which puts a big challenge for the grid operator. I think he's speaking next door at the moment around keeping that stable. And this is something which storage can do. It can. The big challenges work at different time periods. In the immediate period, it's very important for the motors, for the processes in your factories and premises that the system keeps itself close enough to 50 hertz. And these batteries, these systems, these storage systems can kick in within hundreds of milliseconds to provide that compensation. What you'll also be aware of is the time of day peaks and troughs in electricity prices, and that's something which traditionally thermal stations have been scheduled in, scheduled out to match that demand and supply. Now that's more challenging to do with the intermittent renewables, so bringing storage assets in to do that is another piece. Then there's weeks plus, making sure that during some periods, management of energy security. At the moment, that's an important element, particularly on an Irish basis, where we have a lot of interconnectors. That's important in Britain as well. That's important. At the moment, storage doesn't really do that, but that's where interconnectors feed in. So I'm coming from our customer solutions business. We have worked with lots of customers to invest in batteries on their premises. We've also have them at some of our thermal stations. We've got them at our distributed renewable stations, and also embedded directly in the distribution network. Why? Those are the broader places you can put them, basically anywhere with an electricity connection. Personally, I'm really excited by the opportunity to work with industrial users by putting them on your sites, as well as doing that macro effect for the grid, which can drive a revenue. It can also provide local benefits to your sites, where we spoke yesterday about a couple of those around constraints, where if you have if your operations or your growth is being limited because of peak usage, instead of spending a lot of money with the DNO to alleviate that constraint, a battery storage solution is one way to do that. We also spoke about resilience. I think all of us have come across industrial customers who have different, quite often shortish periods of voltage sag events or small or short outages on their network supply. Being able to ride through those for their critical processes can to keep a compressor on as opposed to tripping out. Things like this can avoid a blip in production, which can then take a few hours and often can be measured in tens of thousands of pounds of value lost for the production facility. So the various benefits to having them on industrial sites. These are some of the applications, and really in different businesses, there'll be different broad applications where the storage will benefit you. Looking around this room, we have 50 or so people here. I'd say there'd be various common business threads where you could find common models in there, but there'd be various tailoring of those to the individual sites to make sure that the battery was correctly sized, both in terms of its power, its maximum power it can deliver, its energy, so how long it can deliver that power, and also how quickly it can deliver those power. And then how it's connected to your critical assets, particularly if it's to provide benefits to those. This is my final slide. It's a company we did our first project with in Britain over a year ago. It's a glass manufacturer, or a container manufacturer called Ardagh Group, who do glass bottles and metal containers across Britain, across the world. And their site up in Scotland, they were suffering from these sort of voltage, from two resilience issues, which were giving them a lot of pain. They were suffering from voltage sag events on the DNO, which were lasting, between 500 milliseconds to 1,000 milliseconds. Which the battery system which we've installed there can operate within 100 milliseconds and alleviate some of those drops, which is causing the compressor to kick out, and then their process to be impeded. They also have a second challenge, which is to make glass. You have a large thermal mass within a brickwork furnace. That brickwork furnace, if power is lost to that brickwork furnace, they on site have a diesel generator to power the cooling water so it can be cooled, maintaining its integrity during a longer power cut. It's one of these high impact, low probability effects, but they were maintaining a diesel generator for that. Our battery is now replacing their diesel generator, and they see that as a real benefit in terms of their CSR, their end customers, the likes of Coca-Cola, Diageo, really like to see their suppliers improving their sustainability, so that so that Coca-Cola, Diageo can sell that to the end individual customer. That covers my presentation. I hope I've touched on a few things which give you enough to ask some questions, ask some more. There'll be some things I haven't touched on. Do ask those questions, like between me and the other guys here, we'll be able to answer those well. So thanks you very
James.
much.
Very useful. Just one quick question, if I may, and then we'll introduce the other folk. In your dealings with customers, both on this side of the water and in Ireland, seems to me that this storage has two main attractions. One is resilience, and I think that's probably why your glass makers did what they did. And the other is really pricing management in terms of being able to smooth out the charges and so on. Which of those do you hear more about? And what is it? You know, if you had to design a sales brochure, would you say it's resilience is the main attraction to customers, or is it pricing management that's attraction? Or are you going to say they're both equal?
It's really interesting. I'd say we haven't met any customers who are single person businesses yet. Within those businesses, you find the operations teams are really, really driven by this resilience. And then the finance teams themselves, the pricing management, running that out. There are the putting a price on the resilience is actually is quite challenging, because these events happen in a stochastic, in a time random way. So
there's an educational job to be done, really. Right, I'd just like to give our members of the panel time just to introduce themselves. At the far end is our friend Rob from Bright Energy Storage. Rob Samuelson, he's spoken to us on several occasions now. You're a bit of a veteran at this, aren't you, Rob? Do you want to say just to say a few words while you're here?
Thanks, Andrew. In answer to your question, what do you see as the main benefit? We have a grid of 9 different applications for energy storage: peak shaving, on-site generation, optimization, resilience, grid service revenues, trading revenues, and when most customers will tick 4 or 5 of those boxes at particular sites. So it really is working out what the revenue stack is for an individual site or a collection of sites in your portfolio that will work, and then building a business case around that. So it will never be just one thing, I would argue. And I think in James' case, I think it was 3. You're going for FFR as well, are you, James? On that?
Yeah, so that battery is being operated in some of the flexibility markets alongside control of the electric loads.
Good.
Yeah, so our unique selling point is we link the supply contract, 100% renewable, 0 carbon, that's really important, with a virtual power plant which trades the capacity of the battery in multiple markets to gain revenue, which we then share with the customer. So that's where we differ. But that revenue stream is key and will become more important to pay back the capital investment. Right.
And Aidan, welcome again. You were with us yesterday. You're the battery storage manager at ENGIE.
Yeah, that's right.
You say ENGIE and I'm from France.
It is actually ENGIE, yeah. You get a lot of people
now.
even
Good.
in the UK who try and say ENGIE, but it
what's your interest?
It is ENGIE. I was just going to add a very small point on what James was touching on there, and I think, resilience has come up time and time again the last few days, and what we've seen, the ones that we've got over the line have been, again, you mentioned the ops teams. It's turned out to value a technical solution. Batteries aren't just, an economic force that you can save some money. Sure, we can trade and we can do that. But if you can offer someone a technical solution that protects their site, we find you get better value, better buy-in, I should say, from the on-site team that says, we need this. We've had these outages. This offers us, a problem solving rather than just a financial tool. And those are the ones that I think will make the most sense and have made the most sense for us.
Right.
Yeah.
And Dan, Burgess Salmon, this is contracting terms and conditions and advising your long-term clients on. This is something for them?
Yeah, should I be the only one to follow the format of introducing myself again?
That's what I'm asking you to.
Yeah, so I'm Dan Ballon. I'm an associate at Burgess Salmon. We're a UK-focused independent law firm, and we're based out in Bristol. I sit in the energy team, and I suppose since about 2016 now, I've been very focused on battery storage. We've probably done maybe 300 megawatts of in front or behind the meter transactions, including 3 limited recourse project financings and the battery at the Emirates Stadium, which everyone is aware of, well publicised. So that's what I do. And just to echo what Aidan said, from a legal point of view, behind the meter batteries can be difficult to get away because the contracting is complicated. But to echo exactly what Aidan said, the ones that we've seen being successful on the commercial side are exactly the ones where the client is trying to address a technical issue. And so you almost see you put the battery in to address the technical issue, and the revenue it makes just reduces effectively the capex that's paid out. And those are the ones that we've seen being most successful.
Okay, so that's all set up. We've got 4 real experts here, and they're all at your disposal. So, Simon, welcome.
Simon Angel Fujitsu. Just to follow on the point about technical solution, are you looking at the potential or the increased potential for batteries to replace standby diesel generator sets because of MCPD and SGC? Basically air quality controls on old diesels.
Yeah, I think this came up a bit yesterday. Essentially what we've done is pretty much like that. It's not just replacement, it's, batteries won't...
As an alternative to
but if you think of it rather as, what we've put in place is a grid failure strategy, and batteries are one part of that. And you don't actually have to have a genset on site, but if you install the battery in such a way that it interacts with your HV supply, that you have actually a connection point for a rental generator, you cover yourself off at all angles. Because I can't say to someone, putting a battery in your site is going to solve your resilience issues. It won't, because a battery is a finite amount of energy once the grid goes down. But if you think of it as a larger process, on site, that ops team have to put in place a process once the grid does fail that goes to battery, that can then integrate under a certain time period that we've organised a rental generator. You get rid of the rental generator, you give them a plan for when this happens, and the battery is a part of that. So I think if you... As long as the Greco turn up, mate, this is yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
But it's beginning to look, people are beginning to look at it that way, are they?
That's the one that we've got to work, that it's part of a solution, because the install is quite a significant part about this. People talk about falling battery costs. If you're having to put in new HV, circuit breakers, new transformers at every point, why not use that electrical infrastructure set up to accommodate something else? And we've found quite a good solution that it can accommodate something that's part of a wider process. That NG is quite good at putting into place. So.
Okay. Yeah. Rob, do you want to add a footnote to that, or?
Can you just repeat the questions there? I was so interested in what... you learn a lot from your
it's the first time for everything.
We've got a number of gen sets
Yeah.
across our estate, and we're looking at the impact of MCPD, the Medium Combustion Plant Directive, and the system specified generator control. Specifically, the SGC would force us to apply for a permit and
which you might not get.
probably meet emission limit values if we run those generators for more than 50 hours a year. Now, under a normal testing regime, that's okay, because we might only test once a week. But if we trip that 50-hour limit, we may have to invest. I think at the last conference, somebody quoted £50,000 to £100,000 per set in order to meet ELV.
So what do you get fined if you go over those 50 hours?
Yes.
No. You then require to get a permit, and that permit will probably require you to retrofit
Cleaning.
catalysts and different stacks and all that kind of stuff in order to meet the emission limit values that the permit wants. So there's a potential trigger point where we may hit lots of costs, and over the next 5 and 10 years, those permit conditions are going to come in anyway.
Yeah, I think diesel, any form of diesel emissions in a built-up area are going to be problematic going forward with the more and more stringent air quality limits that come into play. So any diesel investment now is a sticking plaster over a problem that's going to just get significantly harder to dodge. So I think the strategy that Aidan mentioned is exactly the one that is pretty sensible. If you have a contract with a backup diesel company, then you're not having to maintain that asset on site.
The point is always you mentioned.
Well,
grid goes down in a major snow event, and your battery
keeps you going, but a Greco doesn't turn up.
unless it's a flow battery and you've got massive tanks. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's the alternative. You have a low-cost storage medium, and you're prepared to have a lot of energy in reserve, which requires the capital cost of batteries to come down, which is what everyone's working on.
Diesels cost a lot of money.
Yeah, well, I actually think there's a nuanced answer to that, because again, I work within DSR, not just batteries, and it depends on what diesel gensets you have. If you have diesel gensets that are perfectly in good working order, to do that MCPD retrofit and give yourself the ability to go over 50 hours of runtime, there's a really strong payback on that, and you should. I want to work on batteries, sure, but actually there's a really strong payback on that. And if you're getting rid of the diesels anyway, then you can make that choice. But I don't think it's as simple, and we've looked at this, I don't think it's as simple to say you have a diesel, you should get rid of it, if it's working. Those MCPD retrofits are not that strenuous, and if you can run for trial and store, they can have a really good 18-month payback. So there's a bit of everything in terms of what type of genset you have on site.
Briefly, when you run your diesel gensets at the moment, they idle, they don't feed into the supply, do they?
No.
No. So they could be charging a battery at that point.
Comment from you, James?
I think the guys have covered it pretty well.
Okay.
Obviously, like it gets into specifics of exactly what you have, where it is. If it's not end of life equipment, then
We've got some very good ones, and we've got some that saw action in D-Day, I think. And
Okay.
little ships, ex-trawler engines. But
Yeah.
I mean, it was really about the economics of you putting in a new diesel or you're going for the refurb.
Yeah.
Are batteries anywhere near becoming an alternative?
David, you've got similar issues, I would imagine. You've got lots of places in the centre of cities with backup requirements.
Well, I was going to challenge the guys. I challenged the complete flexibility for them today. This is a real example. About a year ago, I got offered the opportunity to house £1 million battery at one of our sites, where I'd be able to profit share to the tune of £10,000 a year, which frankly is worth, it's getting out there for really. One of the things that struck me with this is, well, I guess I'd like your opinion really, is the technology of batteries too expensive at the moment, or is the market or the market rewards for flexibility? I keep hearing how valuable flexibility is. Is that just broken at the moment? Because that £10,000 last year included me avoiding capacity mechanism, which no longer is there this winter.
Those two are so intricately linked that they both stand within each other. The flexibility markets have been utterly changed by the advent of battery storage. And that is due to cheaper battery storage. So you could say there's a dual race going on between the price of, you get for flexibility and the price of battery storage. But the price of flexibility has fallen much faster than battery storage, which is why we're getting projects way, but less projects than we'd have hoped. So it's not quite as separate as you may think. And I think what we mentioned yesterday was the market is changing towards incentivizing new ways to valorize battery storage that are not based on shallow markets like, the ancillary services you're mentioning, but rather deeper. And we've done a lot of work in this now with Kiwi, who are our aggregator. Balancing mechanism is one, but really wholesale market trading, as battery costs reduce, is a viable option. Which, to be honest, we have it in our model, but it's like this, and you get some benefit. But as battery costs reduce, it is becoming more viable. But between flexibility and costs, they are so intricately linked if you look at how they've affected each other.
But David, you're saying for BT, of course, a very, very large user, it just doesn't add up.
We've got an awful lot of diesel backup generation of batteries as well. But I keep looking at this as an area and it just looks worse and worse and worse every year I look at it.
I mean, it's interesting, sorry, just to jump in on that.
I'm working in it.
But I mean, there's kind of two parts there, isn't there? Aidan sort of touched on sort of flexibility services, so you're talking about response services and what's happened in those markets. But then the other part of that for behind the meter is obviously non-commodity cost avoidance. And so there's two ways of valuing flexibility. One is National Grid is running auctions, and the market for that is deciding what those prices are. But on the other hand, you've actually kind of got some regulatory changes which are driving what those non-commodity costs are. So, I mean, it's a real good question there. I mean, the way that Ofgem will say they look at it is, they want the grid to be charged fairly. And so they would say, okay, what the changes they're making will value flexibility, for what it's worth. But actually, it's a very kind of political decision hidden in that. And so what's going on with the TCR and things like that is actually valuing flexibility. And what's really happening is they're saying, well, we want as many people to pay for the grid as possible. So actually, too much flexibility and people stopping paying for the grid is actually not what we want. And so that's driving that value down.
Right. Well, we've given that a good thrashing. Oh, go on then, James.
No, just to say, absolutely, those flexibility markets are changing more now than they have for probably about 25 years when the privatisation of the electricity system happened in Britain. It's being driven by the new technology which is coming in, both batteries, the communications which is enabling DSR to these distributed resources to actually play in the new market in the markets, and that's changing. And then a massive change from steady, controllable thermal generation to a renewable fleet. That change is completely changing things. There's an awful lot of things which are changing at the moment, and that uncertainty is there in some of the revenues, and you can see that in the transmission charging review. You can see that in whatever happened to the capacity mechanism, and is happening to the capacity mechanism. You can see that in some of the revenue streams, whether the ancillary services, the change to the balancing market. Broadly, everything has been thrown up in the air, and it is, as Rob says, challenging to make that business case at the moment. The one thing I'd say is when we've done it, we've taken on a lot of the risk ourselves, because by having a portfolio of different sorts of generators in the market, I see some of those offers the offer which you had sounded not very generous or valuable to you, but where the offer has the risk on the shoulders of someone who's exposed to the market rather than someone whose business is around running a telecommunications network or whatever your business is. In that case, I don't think you really want to be more exposed to the market, would be my guess. So passing that exposure off to a partner is probably right.
Right, okay. Just a quick note, I think we've given this a really good thrashing.
So, with storage, you've got a flexible asset, you've got a number of throughput hours with your warranty, and it could do a number of tasks over the next 10 years. It could provide resilience, it could provide FFR, it could provide cost saving through peak avoidance, could limit your peak and get cost savings that way. So, if what you want to look for is a revenue guarantee from whoever you go, who you trial a site with, and I think it's worthwhile doing a trial because I don't think you can avoid it, because all these changes are going to come at you, and what other technology is there to help you deal with it?
Well, I think you could have a fairly short lunch, you two, together. I don't think David's convinced, but anyway, we've given it a good thrashing. Gentleman over here.
So I've just got, hopefully, one last question. My name's Dan. I'm the Regulation and Compliance Manager for Corona Energy. Firstly, I just want to say that you guys are at the forefront of the exciting world of battery storage, which is going to have a massive impact if it continues going the way it's going on the network and increasing the headroom capacity on the network and things like that. We're living in a world where we're seeing GSPs actually exporting more than they're importing. So we've seen a massive shift in the last few years. My question is, because you are doing the interesting stuff, whereas I'm doing the boring stuff that backs up all of that. Before my life at Corona, I was working quite extensively on the diffuser team for Electric, and I was involved in chairing a number of working groups around the application and eligibility criteria of generation credits on the EDCM and CDCM. For those who don't understand the boring language that I speak, that's basically the charging methodologies around use of systems.
And your question is?
My question is, are you guys getting involved in that? At the time, we were trying to actually get stakeholders involved, because obviously, if you're looking at generation credit application for supporting the network, that's going to have a major impact on some of your consumers in terms of their dual charging. And we really, at the time, which was before the TCR kicked off, we were really struggling to get people involved. So are you watching the changes from TCR and diffuser?
You bet they are. I think the answer is yes, isn't it?
I think the answer for me, anyway, I don't want to speak for others, is yes. Obviously, it's a big part of our business case, but the benefit of being part of a larger energy group is we have people on those panels who feed in our point of view, so we have direct. TCR, unfortunately, we were very much involved in because we have a huge stake in the wider energy group with our pumped hydro assets, with our embedded generation, in that sort of thing. So we keep very abreast of it on our regulation committees, but the one point I'd say about regulation is, and I think it was touched on yesterday, is there has been a disconnect between that TCR and the forward-looking charges, and that is badly planned, but it's also not giving the incentives to flexibility where it's clearly needed. I agree, we shouldn't be building massive batteries in Scotland, in the middle of nowhere where we don't need them. I don't agree that we shouldn't be incentivizing batteries in London where there is huge constraints. So if someone can work projects to do that, they should be given the incentives, which currently they're not. So I think from a regulator's point of view, that's where they need to focus a lot more on.
Yeah, I mean, we believe that the energy market is uncertain enough, and I think the government has a duty, either through the regulator or through the department, to take away as much uncertainty as possible and not create really a huge amount of uncertainty. And at the MEUC, we have set up a task force to challenge what we believe are misconceived ideas in terms of this target charging review, which seems to be all about keeping National Grid to the manner to which it's accustomed and little to do with how customers can cope with what's a changing environment. And we haven't set up a task force since we set up our Credit Action Group in 2008. So a lot of members feel very strongly about this. We think that they're going down the wrong track. We think they don't understand what customers need. And, it's even reached the point of being in on the Sunday Mail, where, they've suddenly realised that those people who are at the lowest end of the customer spectrum could end up with some of the highest increases in prices. So we think it's very, very misguided, and we're going to do a lot more about it. And Rob, you want to say something?
I think clearly legislation and the way to reward batteries from a regulatory point of view has got to change. I think there's Lord Reesdale who's trying to work on something to get some legislation through on that.
Yeah, I mean, on LinkedIn 3 days ago.
Yeah. Well, he's got some interesting ideas to have them as different, because they're cancelled as generation, right? And they're not really. They're both generation and demand. So in our world, we have to work with this, with things how we find them now and try and get projects. But I expect that to become easier over time, because even working with the DNOs, it's hard dealing with the DNOs to release the constraints.
That was kind of responding to the whole point of my question, I suppose, is that the kind of DCUSA changes are looking to actually firm up the arrangements because it's not there currently. So that's why I was asking whether you guys
it's a fair point.
As a panel, because I think that's going to be key for your business models moving forward.
Yes, Andrew, I thought you'd been remarkably quiet this session, actually. Welcome.
Yeah, Andrew Smith with Pneumatic. I won't go through the saga of spending about 18 months talking battery suppliers and the different stories I've got. Just one very quick question. The very optimistic ones came up with about a 4.5-year payback, but then I was told that lithium-ion batteries are not going to last longer than 7 or 8 years anyway. Can you comment on that?
James, you want to go head-to-head on this one?
The projects which we have in are have 10-year life 10-year life warranties, and we've looked at them. The oldest project which we have is about 3-year. We've looked at its degradation, and it fits with that. On the with very frequent cycling, yeah. These batteries are managed an awful lot better than my mobile phone, which does not last more than 3 or 4 years before its battery becomes unusable. So it's a very different output to a very different outcome to that. I have seen between different manufacturers that the high-level energy power numbers can often have various hidden things about actually the allowable depth of discharge and the number of cycles with a long-term warranty. Again, there's quite a lot of technical variance there, and it's something that I like. We've had a team of electrical engineers across my business looking at these different options because it's not straightforward. So I'm not surprised to hear you've had offerings of batteries which don't sound fit for purpose when you scratched under the surface.
Right. Now, Daniel wants to ask a question, and the gentleman in the front.
Just a very quick one. So we've been hearing about falling prices prices. Now, the issue that I have is my site's very space constrained, and these battery arrays that people seem to want to be putting on sites are absolutely huge. And I'm just wondering whether, along with a fall in pricing, we're also seeing increases in energy density and things like that to shrink the size of these pieces of equipment.
Rob, do you want to have a go at that one?
I think
Aidan?
No, but yeah, the quick answer is yes, you are.
Yes.
This is the quick answer. If you are at a very, city centre site, some of the things that we're proposing to do might not be suitable for you, and there's no point in trying to tell you that they are. But in the long term, year on year, when you look at it at the individual cell level, the capacity per cell has increased. So they are becoming more dense, but they're still big assets.
The other thing is you can look at distributing that asset across your site. So there's no reason why you can't have a server cabinet in a certain area. As long as you've got a distribution board and you've got it, connected, that's possible. So you've just got to find like Aidan said, you've got to find a technical solution that works. But fundamentally, it's based on the cell. There are pouch cells or cylindrical cells. So those dynamics aren't really changing that much because they're based on the vehicle manufacturer's demand. So I don't think. People said that with solar as well. We won't get any more efficient panels, so I don't want to say we won't get more efficient batteries. I'm sure we will. We're just scratching the surface. So
We work closely with the suppliers. They are getting, I'd say, every 3 times a year, they will increase the cell density from 310 amps to 350 we're at now. That'll keep going as they build more.
Okay, that's a good answer. And gentleman in the front.
My question here, James, is I noticed on your slide that you had the batteries for Tesla there. So recently I visited Tesla cars, and I'm interested particularly in the technology behind the battery. Can you tell me any more about the technology that you were showing there, in terms of the electrolyte and in terms of the solution you have in the battery itself, the technical aspects of the battery? But we've mentioned on batteries, lithium ion and so forth, but in terms of developments, the key issue is the latest technology of the battery.
So the projects which we've done so far, we did because we're a publicly owned company, we did an open tender, and the successful company which we have worked with on our behind the meter batteries so far, and actually it's also driven by space constraints, has been Tesla. Their cells are about the size of shotgun cartridges. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what the electrolyte is. They're a lithium-ion technology. It just.
That's why I'm interested in to know exactly what electrolyte is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be a little bit too advanced, really.
Off the top of my head, I don't know. And I'm not really embarrassed not to know. The reason is that these things are like the cell, which is about the size of a shotgun cartridge, is then wired into a pack, which is similar size to this table. They're stacked in 20 pieces into each of those cabinets. And those cabinets are then connected to an inverter, which is then connected to a transformer, and then connected to the site's 11 kV or LV distribution. While meeting the space constraints, while meeting the safety requirements, we as a purchaser and our customers are fairly independent as to what's going on at the chemistry level. So that's why I'm not too embarrassed not to know that off the top of my head. I can find out.
Right, well, that's a good point. So, all right, one last question then.
Hi, I'm asking for my estimate. Apologies if this is slightly off on a tangent, but do you think that the energy storage market will get
Battery recycling. Very quick answers from our panel, please, because I'm going to have to draw this to an end.
Where there's muck, there's brass, as they say, and as soon as there's revenue in recycling batteries, so our suppliers will take the batteries back. So I don't think that's going to penalise it. The same for vehicle batteries. There'll be a secondary market.
Yeah?
Very good. Yeah, we did
Yep.
some research on this before. Just like Rob says, there will be in the mid-2020s a positive value for that as an asset because of the way the recycling business is going. We've done a lot of work with those recyclers, so I don't think they'll be penalised for holding that asset at the end of life. No.
Mm-hmm. Is that the way you see it, Dan?
Yeah, we have a podcast on our website somewhere about battery recycling, so anyone can watch that anytime.
Well
I'm
done.
not sure I could find it, but have a go.